start grind.
Please join me in welcoming Dr. Magid Abraham. Great.
Well, thank you. I have a question for you.
You do?
Yeah, what does Mark Zuckerberg have on me?
He has your Facebook account. You do Facebook? No?
I'm a light user of Facebook.
Okay, good, good. Great. Well, I'm so glad that you are able to join us tonight because actually this is our first time here in 1776. 1776 is the up-and-coming, co-working space. So we'll have those guys talk about this space a little later. But usually, I wanted to thank you for coming out. We usually start off our interviews on a personal note. So if you can kind of talk about, where you're born, where you raised, what did your parents do? Let's start with you.
Sure. Well, I was born in Lebanon, in a small town in the Bekaa Valley, and our family was in the farming business. Specifically, we grew fruits, primarily apples, and that's what my folks did, and that's what essentially I did for leisure until I was 17. So every holiday, every weekend, you just go and you tend to the orchards, and it was a great experience because it gave you responsibility from very early on, but it's also an experience that is probably responsible for why I'm here, because I was determined that that's not what I was going to do for the rest of my life.
What kind of orchid was it?
It was, well, we had all kinds of, so the season, if you like, the food season starts maybe in April. So you start with cherries and peaches and whatever, and then it goes all the way into the fall with grapes. But the main harvest was apples.
Wow, awesome. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, you were in southern Lebanon.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Sort of.
And then you moved yourself to Beirut to attend the best school there. And then the interesting part is then you went to the best engineering school in France, right? And that was for obviously for undergrad.
Yes.
And then you did the big move to the United States, to MIT for you worked on your PhD in market research, right?
Right.
So my question to you is this: I mean, a lot of folks here in this room, they come from very successful academic, background. Do you feel that there is a correlation between being successful academically versus being a great entrepreneur? Why or why not?
Well, I think that it's one of those things where there is a correlation, but not necessarily a deterministic correlation. So, if you have a great academic background, usually one of the first things about the quality of the school that you go to is its selectivity. So it will mean that you have a certain intellectual caliber, so that's obviously important. But that you may be textbook smart and you may not be street smart. You may not have the initiative or the personality or the charisma or the leadership. So you have lots of people that go to great school and have great academic backgrounds and are not good entrepreneurs. And conversely, you have people that are dropouts. And Mark Zuckerberg is an example. My son actually was a dropout. But what's interesting about these dropouts is that Steve Jobs accepted, they actually were doing well on an academic track, but they decided that there was an opportunity that couldn't wait, so they decided to leave. So Bill Gates and Zuckerberg, et cetera, are like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because they've already gotten accepted to Harvard, right? And what they do with that later on, it's up to them. But just by the fact that they got it in, that speaks volume. I'd like to kind of, so when you had, before comScore, you created a company called Peregrine Technologies.
Right.
And that was from 1995 to 1999, which was sold to Siebel
Right.
system in 2000, you know, the big CRM. And you had co-founded this company with Linda, your wife, right? So
how does that work?
yeah, I mean, how did you get into business with your wife? Like, how did you get into that conversation? I mean, how did that work? I mean, how did you get into that, in that discussion with your wife? Like, honey?
First of all, we had worked together quite a bit longer than that. In fact, my first job out of school is I developed this software product in Boston. It was a spin-off of MIT, and Procter & Gamble was one of the first companies that bought it. Her first job was a marketing analyst at Procter & Gamble. So we kind of met during those early days, and then a few years later, I moved and rose up in the ranks at a company called Information Resources, which basically specialized in measurement of consumer purchasing, etc. So I called her and we hired her to work there. And 7 or 8, then 3, 4 years later, we got married, and that was in Chicago. And then we decided to start a new company at that point. We had worked really well together. We have kind of a lot of the same interests. We are very honest with each other. So she can give me very honest feedback. I can give her very honest feedback. And that's really a very good, or a necessary, I think, qualification in a partnership. You can't really partner with somebody and you're always guessing at what do they really think. Now, a lot of people are kind of, they wonder about that. I remember the first time I told one of my colleagues that I was going to do a startup with my wife, he said, well, that's a recipe for divorce. And a lot of people think that. In fact, when we were raising money for Peregrine, a lot of the VCs would ask that question. It's kind of, and rightly so, because if there is divorce, then you get into all kinds of ownership issues, and the company could be set back by those kind of issues. So it's kind of part of the judgment that they have to make about, is this really a good team or not? I think one of the things that is really important when you go into a partnership like that with a friend or a spouse, and I would say a friend is probably just slightly lower in terms of complexity than a spouse, which is that you don't want the business relationship, if the friendship starts interfering with the business relationship, and at some point things blow up, then that's kind of where there is a huge hidden cost to the arrangement. So what's really important is that you have from the very beginning an understanding of, okay, so if there is a disagreement, this is the way we're going to resolve it, and ultimately somebody has to make the decision. And whoever is going to make the decision, whoever is the role to make the decision, will make the decision, and you have to accept it. And so you have to have kind of, as part of the relationship, a promise of professional conduct that somebody ultimately is going to be the CEO, and you're working in a company. You may not agree with what the CEO decides, but that's the decision, and just go with it.
And I have mad respect for you, seriously, because when I had been on a project with my wife. She was designer, I was the project manager, and it was 6 months long. And I'll tell you, that had probably been the longest 6 months of my life.
Yeah.
And after that 6 months, we were looking at each other and we're like, we're never going to do this again. So mad props to you. I wanted to talk about that because Harvard Business Review, they had actually come out with a study, and this is what they said. They said, this is an article that came out 2 weeks ago, and it said the most important work relationship is one with your spouse, right? And it was really interesting. And then it went on to say is if you fundamentally respect each other, value and appreciate each other's careers, want to help each other succeed and keep the lines of communication open, you'll be able to handle and quite possibly even embrace the twists and turns you encounter along the way.
So was this an article about co-founding companies?
It was basically about, it talked about your most important work relationship, which was your spouse.
Right.
And basically, there's been success stories of startups that we all know. I mean, Cisco, VMware, Buddy Media, The Knot, Eventbrite. Those were all founded by husband and wife co-founders. So it's really interesting how it's really good that.
So I think the point about respect is really important. You have to you're gonna experience that working relationship every day or every hour of the day, and so you really need to have that the confidence and trust, and you can't if you kind of build resentments or sort of becoming condescending in your relationship at work, then that's obviously gonna totally impact your relationship at home.
Right, it's almost like you're doing that at home. So,
right.
I'd like to kind of shift gears here and talk about the comScore history here. I know that you had sold your company in 2000, the Peregrine to Siebel.
Right.
Then you had started comScore in 1999.
Well, actually, I sold Peregrine in '99 to a company that a year later sold it to Siebel. So
got it.
I had left the company to start comScore.
Sure, because I wanted to ask about the early bootstrapping days of comScore. So let's just talk about that. Like, how did comScore came to be? I mean, did you have like an aha moment, or was there like a personal itch that you wanted to resolve yourself? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you wanted to create that dog food you wanted to eat kind of thing?
So you have to go back to that time period. 1999 was the height of the internet, a lot of the irrational exuberance, and in a way, what I was doing with Peregrine was CRM, but it was CRM using offline data. And there was the gold rush of the internet. There was all the exciting developments there. So it was natural to basically say, what would I do in the internet area that capitalizes on my skills? And so Jan Fagoni, who's one of the co-founders of comScore, and I had actually worked together about 5 years earlier. He was CEO and I was COO of a publicly traded company called IRI. And we kind of converged on the fact that the internet as a medium is going to require third-party measurement for a transaction marketplace to flourish. It turns out that every media market, whether it is radio, whether it is newspapers, whether it is television, you really need a third-party kind of ratings agency, if you like, to be able to measure what the audience is like and help people buy the advertising and evaluate what it's worth. So that wasn't a new idea in the sense there were a couple of companies that were doing it, but the new idea with comScore was that everybody was so focused at the time about unique visitors. So everybody would talk about these are my uniques, and it was just purely a game of eyeballs. And a lot of the companies at the time had very iffy business models. They would get, eyeballs that may visit you, or you may artificially inflate that number. But the question is, what's the value of those eyeballs? So we were focused on what do people do, and what is, if we're talking about the audience of a particular site, what do they do when they buy online? What transactions do they make? So we wanted to focus on the value of the eyeball rather than counting the eyeballs, which is in essence basically taking the offline model that we know is a proven model, and we know that it's something that would scale, and then applying it to the internet. And the bet is that once the initial craze of the internet goes away, and essentially the internet starts living off of enterprises. I mean, if you think about it, all the ad monetized business, is dependent on advertisers spending money on the internet, which funds all the development and all of that. So eventually, it's the Citibanks and the Procter & Gambles and the AT&Ts of the world that would be the ultimate customers. And those customers are not going to be just happy with, oh, I got 2 million users of this kind of demographics. They want to understand what do those people do, and are they good for me to go and try to communicate with them.
So was that your original thesis when you had started at comScore? You're like, that's exactly how we're going to do this.
That was the original thesis.
Wow, and it hasn't really, you haven't really pivoted away from that very much, right? I mean, still the value of the stickiness of the website.
We made some, adaptation,
right.
But yeah, the original business plan, I think, predicted exactly how the industry was going to evolve. And it was a good thing because if you look at the companies that started in 1999, funding was very easy at the time, but
all right, what do we do here?
Well, it was a different time, first of all. You talked about bootstrapping. We did some bootstrapping in the sense that, we funded kind of the startup and the business plan period. But when we got started, it was a real company. We expected that there was going to be a lot of capital spending in terms of building data centers and recruiting panelists, et cetera, et cetera. So this was not kind of a small operation. It really required an investment in capital with probably a burn rate of about 20 million. So the difference is that when we raised the money, we got to a high enough level of VCs that can basically write big checks, that have a big name, so that if you want to have follow-on financing, you can find, first of all, they can support you, but you can find new VCs. Now, today, it's a different story in the sense that, for example, if you want to buy servers, you don't have to buy servers. You can just basically rent stuff in the cloud. So the capital requirements today are very different from the capital requirements that we had at that time. We ended up having to raise a lot more money than we wanted to, and the reason is that the bottom fell out of our market in 2000. So all the customers that would be natural buyers for our product, well, not all, but a lot of the customers, a lot of the dot-coms basically went out of business. And a lot of after the internet bubble burst, a lot of the enterprise companies started cutting back on their e-commerce investments. And so as a result, there was a clear compression in the marketplace. and essentially that I would call the internet nuclear winterland. It's just basically, it's devastation. You know, there were very, very few healthy companies, few companies that were investing, and that's where, when you go back to our original business plan, we counted on enterprises to help support us. And if we had not done that, we would have gone under. 95% of the businesses that got started in '99 got under. So our first customer, for example, was pets.com. Who remembers pets.com? Okay. By the time, I think they were a client for about 4 months, and then they went out of business. Our second client was American Express. Now, American Express not only was about 25 times the amount of revenue we were generating from pets.com, but obviously it had lasting power, it had a big brand name, et cetera, et cetera. So what happened with comScore is that even though it was really tough times and a lot of companies had a hard time raising money, because we were demonstrating traction in the marketplace and because we had companies like American Express, like AT&T, are actually buying our products with strong validation that we have something that the market needs, and it's just that, you know, the market is running into a tough time. Now, one of the lessons, though, is that if we didn't have the right VCs that have the courage of their conviction, a lot of them would have basically gotten cold feet and ran away. And you know, we were lucky that we had Excel as one of the funders, and Fred Wilson, who was running Flatiron at the time, was one of the funders. So we got, you know, they're both actually, there's a ranking of the top 100 VCs in the country. Excel has like, in the top 10 has 3 or 4, and Fred Wilson is in the top 10. So we were lucky that we got really strong professional VCs that helped us.
This is back in 2001.
Yeah, but they stayed all the way until 2007 when we went public. So one of the downsides, there are a lot of upsides for doing business in this area, but one of the downsides is that the VC ecosystem is very, very limited. So you have a lot of companies that, you know, may do an investment of $2 million in a company with multiple stages. I would say, with the exception of NEA, you probably, that's probably the only caliber of companies that you find a lot of on the West Coast. So if your only backer is a VC that will invest $200,000 or $500,000 or $1 million at a time, and you run into trouble, you know, if they're not able to write the check and they don't have the brand name to attract co-investors with them, that's a problem. Okay. Now, the other thing that we ran into was that a lot of West Coast VCs did not want to invest in an East Coast-based company because they didn't want to spend a day essentially coming to a board meeting. And so a lot of them basically said, okay, you move to the Bay Area, we'll fund you. You don't want to move, we'll fund you. Excel actually took a really interesting approach, and they said, if we can get a co-lead from the East Coast, then we'll be comfortable investing. And that's how we got Fred Wilson. We got to invest. Now, I would say if you have a startup and it has traction, you're better off going to New York and Boston and trying to get funding, or going to the West Coast rather than sticking around the DC area for getting funding. There is the dynamics, the VC psychology, first of all, there is a herd mentality. So if you have a group of VCs, somebody gets excited about something and everybody wants to know what's going on, what's the excitement about. somebody gets pessimistic about something, then they all start dumping on the same thing. So you really have to have a really good, experienced, high-quality VC to be able to avoid that. That's the first thing. The second thing is that if you have a Series A VC that's, let's say, a second-tier or third-tier VC, you will not find a first-tier VC to do business with. They will not come in as a lead after a lead from a second or third tier VC. So now, of course, there are exceptions. So if you're Facebook and they see that potential, they will come in. But for the most part, where you start actually limits you in terms of how far you can go.
Most of our attendees here, I would say, are founders, right? And so they're starting up, and they're kind of like bootstrapping, right? They're trying to find some funds. You're funding from your mom. Like we had Eugene Stoltzfus of Rosetta Stone talk about how he got funding from his mother, right?
Right.
And I'm sure we're kind of like in the same scenario as well. But your advice, when you said go to New York or go to Boston, does it really matter when you're doing the bootstrapping days? Does it really matter where you are in the beginning? I mean, I understand like the whole Series A institutional funding.
No, and I think you can be in DC just fine. I mean, there are a lot of advantages to DC. There is a huge technology base. There are a lot of contractors and people that are really bright that want to work in true technology companies rather than kind of contract work or kind of being a small fish in a huge pond. So there is the talent, unlike the West Coast where you can't hold on to your employees. There's always a lot of competition. You're competing with really big name companies that offer a lot of benefit. There's also a culture on the West Coast, which is that, if you're an engineer, your best strategy to get rich is to have a diversified portfolio of stock options. So you just basically, go to one company, work 2 years, and go to another company, work 2 years, and essentially you become kind of like a VC. You have a portfolio of a few companies. One of them hits, and that's how you make your money. So there is a culture that's very different from the culture on the East Coast, where you have much more continuity, employee loyalty, et cetera, et cetera. So those are some of the big advantages. Here, but the disadvantage is that because of the nature of the ecosystem, sometimes you're forced to think small. And the reality is that, Boston and New York have a lot of really top-notch VCs, and they don't mind taking the shuttle to come down here and attend the board meeting. But they're not taking a red eye to come in, and they're not flying, taking an entire day to do it. So, there is an avenue, but I think that thinking about kind of what I would call satisficing by trying to get kind of the first VC that's going to give you some money that's local, if I was doing it, I wouldn't do it. I would just basically get to my product where I have a solid enough prototype, solid enough proof of concept, and I would go to top-notch VCs. And if those top-notch VCs are not going to back me, that means there's something wrong with my product. That it's really not a scalable idea, or it's not, or there is something missing, et cetera, et cetera. Capitalism is all about what people are willing to pay for your product or for your ideas.
Now that's actually kind of interesting, Dr. Abraham, about talking about, your approach, because I know that the whole lean startup concept with Steve Blank and Eric Ries is always to create the MVP and try as little as possible, the cheapest way to get to a customer to pay for a product.
Right.
And what you're suggesting is a little bit different than that, right? I mean, it's
no, I think that you need to get to a point where you have proof. And there is no better proof than a customer that's paying, but sometimes your business is such that to get to that stage, it's going to require more money. Yeah. And so, you know, you have to calibrate your approach depending on what is needed for an investor to get the proof and the comfort that, you know, your plan is going to work. The other thing I want to say is that you have to pay attention to who is on your team, because and kind of what's your prior experience. You know, VCs will tell you probably heard this a lot, which is VCs invest in people, not ideas. Okay, and that's very true. They want to make sure that the money that they invest is going to be the execution on the plan is going to work well, and that you have people who have the experience or who have the track record or who have succeeded before to do that. And I think if you're a CEO but you don't have that track record, look for a chairman who has that track record, or look for you know, somebody that has been as part of a proven success. That's really going to help you. If you don't, then the burden proof is higher.
Okay. I was going to go over some of the mega trends, but I think I want to open up the floor for Q&A. I know a lot of you guys have questions, so we'll just go around and ask us. Anybody have a question? Okay.
Sir, thank you for bearing with us tonight. Really appreciate hearing your thoughts. I think you'd mentioned at the beginning that you had some competitors in your space when you initially started up comScore, and I was just curious if you could identify the top couple of factors that helped you emerge as the industry leader.
Well, so of our key competitors, one survived, which is Nielsen. Nielsen does TV, and they wanted to measure the internet. When we started, we raised on our Series A $9 million. They had gone public. They had actually an investment in a company called Net Ratings, which they later fully acquired, but they had about a 50% stake in it. So they had about 80% market share at the time when we started. And so we did have a unique concept, which was e-commerce. So anybody that's interested in e-commerce or transactions online or whatever, like American Express, for example, there isn't really anything that Nielsen could have offered them. So we started kind of getting into market niches where our product is unique, and then the nature of the market, or the nature of the internet, is that it moves so fast that there are always new things that represent opportunities. So for example, you go from measuring web pages to measuring search, to measuring advertising, to measuring video, to measuring mobile, to measuring. So if you are innovative and you are fast afoot, you're going to basically occupy that hill before they even figured out that opportunity is there. And by the time you occupy the hill, you basically get on that hill 100% market share. And so our strategy is always to kind of be 2 years ahead. And with 2 years ahead, it gives you enough of a lead time. It gives you enough of a lead time to build your market share. And as time goes on, you know, we ended up having a much more compelling portfolio, much more innovative set of solutions, a reputation of being a thought leader, innovative company, fast moving, et cetera, up to the point where Nielsen is, for web measurement, is pretty much a non-factor in the United States.
Hi, Dr. Abraham. So in your Series A, you raised $9 million, and
Right.
your concept and everything is a very labor intensive, and you, as you say, you need to have a lot of build out for it. Did you, going back to our fire drill like tonight and looking at your seed round and at the beginning, A, how did you get through the fire drills that you had, and B, how did you make up that seed round when you, for your proof of concept that obviously would have taken a lot to show its true value or full value?
We didn't have a formal seed round. We, you know, the co-founders had enough money from prior things that, you know, we didn't really need a seed round per se. But actually what's interesting is that in Series A, the investors asked us to co-invest with them. So that was, you know, part of the proof, if you like. But at the same time, they knew that we're both entrepreneurs that have run public companies. We have a great track record, and in essence, for each VC, it took 2 presentations. The joke that we have is that we really didn't have a prototype. Again, a prototype is very expensive in this case because you have to acquire a panel of 1 million people, and you have to build all this technology and server farms and all that. It's a different environment. But so when we did the round of the West Coast, and then we went to New York, we got commitments very quickly from Excel and from Flatiron, New York, and the post-money valuation was $26 million. So it turned out to be $1 million per PowerPoint slide. And so the joke is that we should have had 35 slides, and maybe. But you know, clearly those days are. You know, the environment is different now. But believe it or not, if you have the track record, or you have somebody on your team that has a track record, on the West Coast, it's not at all out of the realm to basically get funding on the basis of an idea or a business plan.
Okay, next question.
Hi, my name is Sean Mallon. I'm with the Center for Innovative Technology and a co-investor with you in some instances. You had the analogy you made before in terms of going after the top investors is something I've been spinning around in my head, and I kind of think it's like I'm going to apply to Harvard. If I don't get into Harvard, I'm not going to college, kind of thing. It's almost like there is a big, albeit not necessarily as prestigious a group, kind of down from the top 10 VCs. But it seems to me that if you get a no answer from the top tier that you go after, and you can get a yes from the next tier down, and that enables you to move the business forward, that the courage of your conviction should be enough to allow you to take that, particularly if you don't have a track record that speaks for itself.
Well, that is true, but I'm not talking about doing the top 10 VCs. I think that there are probably 50 VCs that have enough of a scale that that it's fine. I mean, any one of them would be fine as an investor. I would say if you need further time for proof, maybe raise more angel money. And you know, ultimately, if you have to, I mean, if you take your analogy for a university, okay, so if you couldn't go to Harvard but you settled for UVA or Carnegie Mellon, that's still good. But on the other hand, if you went to, I don't know, University of Hawaii, hope nobody is from University of Hawaii, but you know, I mean, that in and by itself, you know, says something.
And I think another thing that I see a lot too these days is you can have a really good business,
right,
on a relatively small amount of money, right? In terms of getting going,
exactly.
You don't need to raise $9 million or $20 million. You can raise $500,000 and get into the market, positive cash flow, even potentially as well.
Right.
Okay, we want to have 2 more questions.
Okay, my name is Marla. My question is coming as a marketer, as somebody who uses comScore as a tool occasionally. I'm wondering, from your perspective, what other tools are out there that would complement comScore that maybe you've watched and you admire?
Well, one of the areas, so comScore traditionally is a marketplace measurement tool. So it measures kind of everybody in the marketplace. And so as a result, we have a very wide net that we cast. We measure a lot of people, but we don't have the sample size that would be enough to provide you with a lot of detail within your own website. So there is a natural pairing, and in fact, we actually changed our approach where we started combining a sample with essentially web analytics data. A website will put a pixel on every page, and as that page gets loaded, we know about it, and we can improve the precision, the granularity of what we're measuring. So web analytics is actually a natural complement to what we do. And we ended up 2 years ago buying and developing a web analytics product that's built on a big data platform, very easy to scale, very easy to integrate all kinds of different data, and people are interested in creating kind of integrated data sets or integrated dashboards, and the ability of being able to rely on the depth and the breadth is something that's a very nice complement. So that's one area that I would say that's kind of more of a tool or a software application, but there is a lot of measurement technology that's involved. I mean, today, if you want to measure a website, you have to measure video well, you have to measure their apps well, you have to measure their mobile websites, you have to deal with cookie deletions or cookie acceptance that are different by platform, and customers are interested in a single view of the customer or their client or their visitor. And right now, the nature of things is that you could have 5 or 6 different IDs that represent a single customer. So part of what we bring to the party is the ability to be able to provide a unified customer view, which kind of leverages a lot of our core expertise in measuring people behavior and measuring the web.
Okay, one last question.
Hi, my name is Tomoko, and I apologize in advance. This is not regarding your company, but I know that he mentioned you were from Lebanon, and I have a question pertaining to that, which is that I have visited a wonderful country, and one of the questions was that what is it about the country that enables so many entrepreneurial individuals and very highly successful individuals in the business, in the arts, what have you, given how small of a country it is, and even with the diaspora, so such a small population, what do you think it is about the culture or the nation or something or other that enables that?
Well, I would say from early history, the historical Lebanon is Phoenicia. So the Phoenicians were always traders all around the Mediterranean, and in fact, they populated some of the Atlantic coast. So they were, in essence, even at the beginning, entrepreneurs. They went to countries that nobody had discovered before. They established trade routes. So there is kind of that kind of culture ingrained in there. The other thing that I think probably characterizes Lebanon is that you hear a lot about how Lebanon is a mosaic of lots of religions and lots of different minorities, etc. And the reason for that is that the terrain itself makes it a good place for people to take refuge, because it's very hard to pacify. So it's not like it's not like a plain where an Ottoman army or an Arab army can come and basically. So take Damascus, for example. It was a big city, probably much bigger than the Arabs came, and within a couple of months they took it over. But they couldn't take over Lebanon, because Lebanon has a lot of mountains, and people would basically go and hide and maintain their freedom in the mountains. So maybe it's self-selection, but it's a country that to some extent has a genetic makeup of rebels, and they just wanna do their own thing. They like freedom, and so if you look at the modern history of Lebanon, there are probably 3 or 4 times more Lebanese outside Lebanon than inside Lebanon. So that kind of Phoenician tradition has continued, and people have gotten out to basically emigrate to different countries, start new businesses, sometimes small, sometimes large, but that's kind of part of the DNA and the culture.
So one last question actually that I have, since a lot of folks are probably here, what they want to ask this question would be, sure. Do you do a little bit of advising, like startup advising? Like, are you an advisor or a mentor for startups either here in DC?
I do. I'm on a couple of boards. So I do, but unfortunately, I'm not as dependable as I could be, because in a lot of cases, my schedule is kind of crazy. So I'm not as dependable, and therefore I tend to be very careful in making a commitment if I feel like I can't keep it. But what I look at is, can I add value, and is this an idea that's kind of interesting and scalable? Because there are a lot of interesting ideas. The question is, how big can it be? So in a way, I'm without necessarily looking at the financial end of it, I am asking the same question that a VC would ask, which is, how big is this?
What are some of the themes that interest you? Like, I mean, do you do angel investing yourself? And
yeah, I do some angel investing. So the areas that are clearly hot are anything having to do with mobile or local, any kind of software that helps people turn an offline business into an online business. Those are the kinds of disruptive things that are very interesting. Social is kind of a mixed bag, at least as far as I don't think that I understand the social generation as much as a lot of people here in the room. So if you told me when Facebook got started that Facebook was going to take off, I would have said, or Twitter, I would have said, I don't understand, what's the big deal? So I don't feel like I have a good appreciation for that. That's, so in a lot of cases, there are a lot of kind of social startups that might be very promising, but I'm unlikely to appreciate them because I'm just not part of that generation.
Yeah, but you follow them. I mean, with comScore, you're following these startups.
I follow them. But as I said, I mean, if you told me that Twitter was going to be a phenomenon, I mean, I can see it. I can see it take off, and you can usually predict with the speed of ramp up how successful a company is going to be. So you can see it really well with Pinterest or.
I was just going to ask you that. So what are some of the startups you see right now?
I mean, so Pinterest had an amazing growth early on, and in the last year probably had 300 to 400% growth. And obviously when you're looking at it from an early base, it's 10x, 20x. So those kind of companies you see, and they're obviously a good idea. They're getting traction in the marketplace. They have consumers that follow them. Would I have predicted that Pinterest is going to be a big thing? No, I just don't have an appreciation for it.
Okay, so as our last question, we always wrap up our...
question before last, or?
This is the last question.
Okay.
And then we'll do shout outs, and so again, you guys, what shout outs are, as you guys can talk about, you have 10 to 15 seconds to talk about what you're doing, and if you're looking for somebody, but we'll do this afterwards. But the last question, the most important question is, we usually ask our guests, who is your favorite superhero and why? And then we expand that to who is your favorite historic hero and why. So.
Well, there are a lot of historic heroes that would be obvious, but one that's not quite so obvious is Marco Polo. And if you think about Marco Polo, he was in the 12th century, basically traveled from Venice all the way to China, 10,000 miles, probably ran into all kinds of obstacles and security risks and whatever along the way. But he symbolizes to me, symbolizes the thirst for discovery, for knowledge, for curiosity, and for taking risk. So in a way, he's the consummate entrepreneur and helped bridge essentially the cultures of two continents that didn't know anything at all about each other until he made his travels and was able to write about it.
And discovered spaghetti on the way too, right? So obviously you told me the answer, and what I usually do is I try to look for an action figure hero, but I couldn't find one for Marco Polo. Okay. But I did find a poster, and this one was a little bit peculiar because this is a very old, famous picture of Marco Polo.
Yeah.
And so here it is, and it has he's putting on his startup grind T-shirt there. So this is yours.
Well, I'm sure a startup. Thank you very much.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Magid Abraham, and thank you for coming out.